Hey everyone, my name is Mary and I am a family mentor with Equip. And I have a little bit of a unique perspective, I would say, as a family mentor, because it was actually my younger sister who I was a carer for when she was going through treatment for anorexia restrictive type. She was 13 when she was first diagnosed. So at that time, I was still young. I was 17. I was in high school, but we, as a family, all kind of, had a very interesting experience navigating her eating disorder treatment journey because SBT was something that we were very interested in, but wasn't something that was readily available to us at the time. So it took a lot of trial and error and tinkering with things to kind of get us to a place where we had a solid strategy in place for a while. And then, once we had, my sister decided that she was going to go to the same university that I attended. So at that point, I was graduating and I decided to stay in that city where I went to school. Got a job there, and my sister moved in with me. And at that point, I was her sole carer while she was well on her way through her recovery journey. My sister's now graduated from college and employed and living independently, and very much she would tell you she's fully recovered. So it's been quite a journey, and I'm very honored to be able to share it with all of you tonight.
All right, sorry, working on getting those other two panelists in. Not totally sure what happened, but super excited to have them join and we'll get it worked out. So I'll just take a couple of moments while we're waiting for them, just to introduce folks to the group and sort of what we're doing here today. So again, I'm JD. I'm the host of this group, Director of Lived Experience here at Equip, and doing this work after leaving education to work in this field after helping my daughter recover from anorexia, my youngest daughter. Mary is a family mentor with Equip, and as she's introduced herself, with a very specific experience as a sibling, which is such an important thing. So I'm just letting folks know as we go through this, where our main focus will be sort of starting with talking about siblings, but all questions are open for the group. We also, you are more than welcome to raise your little Zoom hand and I'll let you speak on camera. And if you don't want to do that, we've got the Q&A, we've got the chat function, all of that sort of stuff. So that's really, really helpful. And I am just going to try not to, we've got somebody. Hang on just a second. Let me let all right. Kim, you are promoted to panelist. Yay. That will enable me to introduce you. Thanks, folks, for dealing with the rocky start to this. We haven't had this little snafu before, but now we do.
So sorry, it was declining me for some reason, so I couldn't.
That is so interesting. Yeah, there's some tech gremlin happening. So, but we got you here, and hopefully we're going to get Bella here as well. So, Kim, Mary did an introduction, and I just introduced the topic and sort of for housekeeping, how people can join us. So, if you want to do your introduction, that would be great.
Wonderful. Nice to meet you, Mary. Hi, my name is Kim Paikanka, everyone, and I am a sibling. My sister was bulimic, and oh my goodness, from very early on, I don't even give ages anymore because it was quite early, her onset. And my sister was also probably started binge eating disorder and morphed into her primary, which was bulimia. And she struggled for over 15 years seriously with severe consequences, and ultimately did pass at the age of 30, 20 years ago this year. So it took me some time to heal from that clearly, obviously, and to really understand the sibling experience and what my family had gone through. And boy, did we go through it all. So there's nothing today, ladies and gentlemen, that you can ask that will be don't be afraid. I have been through it. I'm sure I've experienced it. There's nothing to be ashamed of or fearful of asking at all. And you can ask me anything. I did a sibling survey in 2018 with Bridget Whitlow, and we did it to kind of see if my experience was just my experience or if there was this thing as a sibling experience. And we got over 500 responses from ages 9 to 70 and from all over the world. It was, I think, 9 countries. And oh my gosh, no, my experience was not just mine. It was quite eye-opening. And from that, I've developed some sibling series, podcasts, and talks, and so on and so forth, and continue to do that. So my hope and my goal is always to get the sibling voice heard and to help us all understand how to support them with tips and tools, and absolutely no stigma, shame, or secrecy. That is my tagline. Absolutely. I think those are just the way to creating chaos and dysfunction.
Kim, I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the insights that you had from that survey. Was anything that surprised you, or just themes that you think are really important that people hear about?
We did have definite themes emerge from the survey, and they do go along with the very little bit of research that is out there on siblings. And it did go with other research on siblings from other fields. So this is not unlike anybody else, really. And some of those themes were siblings want to be acknowledged. They want to have parents or people they care about say, yes, there's an impact on you. This is something that's happening in your life and it's hard. They want to hear that. Number 2, they want education. They want to know what is going on. What is happening to my sibling? Why is this happening to my sibling? How do I help? What's my role? Where do I belong in this storyline? They want to have support. They're really craving other siblings. They want to connect with other siblings so they can hear me too, like we all do, right? Oh gosh, support, and they want answers to what do I do when? How do I handle X? What do I say to my brother when he's feeling this way? What's my role when they ask me to keep a secret, but I know my parents should know that? What do I do? Ooh, help me. There's a lot of fear and a lot of question around that. So those were some of the themes that really emerged. And a lot of thank yous. Thank you for asking the question. We're not asked. We're not even seen in this process. So just to be seen and just to be heard and just to be able to say, I see this is happening. And we can talk a little bit more about that because parents often ask me, should I tell my sister, my younger kids, should I tell the sibling this is happening? It's a big question.
And actually, it's our first question that came in. So I'm going to let Bella introduce herself. And again, thanks everybody, especially the panelists, for being so forbearing with the little tech snafu that we had. But we'll go ahead and have Bella introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right in on that question that is so pertinent, Kim, to what you're talking about.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bella. I am currently 24-year-old in Michigan going to medical school. And I was 12 years old when my younger sister, she's 2 years younger than me, so she was 10 at the time, when she was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. Our younger brother was 6 at the time. So yeah, I found I guess my biggest role throughout the whole process I found was definitely kind of watching after my younger brother, especially when there were difficult days and my family had to deal with things going on with my sister downstairs. I would often retreat upstairs with him and turn on a movie or read a book, play games, and forced me to mature really quickly, which I learned to think about in a positive light in retrospect and as I've gotten older, but it was really hard at the time growing up, and still I'm retrospectively learning a lot about myself and the things I felt and maybe why I felt those ways that I wasn't really comprehending at the time. And I currently run a sibling support group. So that's something I've been doing since October. I have weekly Zoom sessions with girls that are like 15 and under, that come and they are dealing with a sibling who's struggling right now and going through a recovery process. So it's just, yeah, a very comforting space to be open and talk about all the roller coaster of emotions that comes with everything, and just really validate that, hey, you're feeling these ways, I felt those ways too, it's okay, it's normal. Here's maybe some ways we can work through it, some ways you can learn to take care of yourself and prioritize yourself. That's definitely a recurring theme I see a lot, that I went through as well. It's sometimes it's even tricky to muster up the energy to want to ask your parents to like help on a math problem for your homework, or to read your essay. It's, you're like, oh, I don't want to stress them out, and I know they're dealing with so much already. So it's really comforting to talk to all these young kids, and let them know that their feelings are valid and they need to take care of themselves too during this tricky process. So yeah, that's kind of my role I found throughout all this. But yeah, it's yeah, that's all I have for now.
Well, I want to really highlight sort of this theme of peer support that runs through sort of everything that we do, and what we all believe in so much is that that person that's experiencing something that you know, have experienced, you're experiencing it, they've experienced that connection. And it doesn't have to be a perfect match. No two people are going through this. You don't have the same number of kids, the ages are different, all those sorts of things. But it's even sort of just that connection is more fundamental in terms of your role and things like that. I want to read the question that we had in the Q&A come in. My daughter, who's in PHP right now, doesn't want to share where she is with her brother. He's in the Navy and currently deployed. When he comes home soon and asks where she is, it puts me in the middle. I've been honoring her wishes and telling friends who ask that she has an internship out of state. Not sure I'm going to be able to tell that to her brother. How do I encourage her to share with her brother, or should I just continue to stay in the background? And I do think for the questioner, it might be helpful for us to know the age of your child that has the eating disorder, because I think that probably will impact some of how we answer that. But do you just want to, maybe whoever wants to sort of just jump in general terms, because I think this is a question that comes up all the time. And so really want to provide sort of background context for people listening that might not be, you know, super well versed in eating disorders over a long period of time. Virtually all eating disorders want to be secretive. And they sort of thrive in that secrecy. There's a lot of shame around it, all of those sorts of things. So, so that's one of the dynamics that's sort of really important to recognize, that this is sort of not a unique situation to sort of any one person with an eating disorder. It's pretty universal. And it's also, I'm going to borrow a little from Jenny Schaefer, who wrote the book, Life Without Ed, or Goodbye Ed, Hello Me, who uses a metaphor of an abusive boyfriend in her writing, and the way that there's sort of like a grooming to isolate and to drive wedges between you and everyone you love, and to push everyone away. And it really does, having seen it in my own house, that's a very, very apt metaphor of that way of using that, and really using everyone else in the family. Very hard to contemplating sort of taking someone's agency away about their, health condition or something like that. That's like very foreign to us, and in most settings is really counter to what you would do. And just providing the context that virtually always an eating disorder impacts every single person in the family. So in some ways, for me, this kind of, it's definitely going to depend on the age, and we're going to answer this specific question because it's 23 and 24-year-olds, so that may be a little bit different. For those folks who have younger kids, I would never sort of advocate just like, without telling you, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to like tell people. I do advocate the idea and the knowledge that everyone in a home knows something's happening in the home, whether you call it the energy of the house or sort of whatever. So just the idea that we could ever keep siblings from knowing something, even if they don't know what the something is, I think it would be, in my experience, just not a thing that could possibly happen. Everyone knows it's something, and if they don't know what it is, their imagination is making up some stuff. And not that there's much worse than an eating disorder, but sometimes imaginations do go to even worse places. So in this case, love to hear what you would all say from your perspectives for a family, who has a kid in PHP who's 23, and then a 24-year-old brother who's like what's going on, and what are we going to say? Whoever wants to jump in first.
I'll jump in.
I want to hear from all of you.
I get this question all the time. The answer, the simple answer is absolutely tell him. 1000%. There's not a question in my mind. This is, JD, you explained, I think, a lot of it beautifully. From a sibling perspective, there's a lot that's going to go on in your son's mind if he finds out later. And I think it's really damaging to the family. And I will add, one of the other themes that came up very strongly and that I neglected to mention was communication. I would say 80% of the people on our survey said, please let us know what's going on. What is happening? Do not leave us in the dark, because it feels like, and I will speak to personally what it felt like for me, isolation from the family. I'm not allowed to know what's going on. I can't, I'm not, what, am I not important enough to know? In a younger mind, I went to, younger being 20s, sorry, for me now that's younger. It was, I felt separated from the issue. It frightened me more because I didn't know what was going on. And I knew my sister had an eating disorder, but there was a lot of other complications I was guessing were happening, but not knowing and not getting a clear answer. And there was this, I'd ask, and there was this sort of shuffling around of answers. And it felt really isolating, very confusing. And I started feeling a little bit gaslit. You know, am I crazy? I know this is going on, but no one will answer the question. And I would hate for him to go through that. And so that's like the emotional side of me saying that to you. And on a practical side, you know, it is, I love what you had to say about that. It is the cycle of an eating disorder. They so want to keep it secret because there's shame and there's stigma and there's, what will he think? Oh my gosh, what's our relationship going to be? There's fear in that. And this is an opportunity to learn some wonderful tools and some ways of communication with him and to face this. And I missed that with my sister. That's, people always say to me, what do you wish? I wish that I learned how to have resiliency, how to step up into this. He's got to learn how to deal with her, and she's got to learn how to deal with them. And this is a beautiful opportunity for those siblings to become very close and to there might be some question, there might be some, he might not react perfectly, but that's okay. She's got to deal with that, you know? So that would be my humble response to that.
Yeah, and as you said that, Kim, and I want to hear from Mary and Bella as well, I also think about that you need support to navigate this as well. And so we were open with everyone from day one. But I can only imagine my daughter's siblings were all over the age of 18 and all in college or grad school. How could I have a conversation an authentic conversation with my daughter and sons if they had no idea about the biggest, most important thing happening in all of our lives and our families as well? And I just really don't know, Kim, that I'd ever actually even thought about it in terms of what you just so poignantly described of feeling like you were the one on the outside. So instead of sort of the eating disorder itself being on the outside of the family, the eating disorder was in the family and you were out of your own family. And that's just that really, gosh, gives you a lot to think about. Yeah.
And also one other thing, I asked my mom many years later, why did you not do that? And she said, I didn't want you to think less of her. And it was a gut punch because I wouldn't have thought less of her. I would have wanted to help.
And even if you had, as you pointed out, you know, misconceptions and things like that, if we talk about it, we have the opportunity to educate on all of those sorts of things. Yeah. Mary and Bella, what are your thoughts on that? And not to throw you under the bus, Kim, but the two of them are a lot closer to the age group we're talking about than you or I.
Yeah, so I'm thinking back to actually my sister went right before she went off to college. She had a little bit of a relapse, and she went to a intensive outpatient, sorry about that, program that was actually a stipulation that was placed upon her by the university that she was going to attend. And it was very interesting because that act in and of itself felt invasive to her. And she felt a lot of shame about this, this idea. To her, it was a failure to have to go into active treatment again. And so she didn't want anyone to know that she was going to be in this intensive outpatient program before going to school. And I would say, from my perspective, it's a little bit difficult for me to answer this question, because I've always erred on the side of like respecting my sister's autonomy, and her, her needs and desires for privacy. I always felt were very valid, but at the same time, an eating disorder is something that just profoundly affects the internal family dynamic. And this was something that my parents had to know. And so I told them what was going on. And of course, for logistical reasons, insurance and stuff, like, they're going to know that she's in treatment. And I think that's the distinction that I've always tried to make. It's kind of keeping people in the loop that have to be in the loop, but still walking that fine line between respecting her wishes and her autonomy as a human being, and also respecting the fact that there are people that have to be involved and they have to know. I think in my situation, just the fact that I was a sibling carer was unique in and of itself. I've always been like a very sort of a type A person. And, even when my sister was first diagnosed, I was very invested in what treatment was going to look like for her. And it just so happens that the way that our family dynamic is, my parents were okay with that. I know that some parents would be totally like, no, this is not, you're not a parent, you don't have a say in this. And that can be, in my opinion, like so damaging to someone who really wants to impact not just their sibling, but the whole family in a positive way. I never felt like I wanted to, especially because I was at an age where I was older and I was totally capable of understanding what was happening, right in front of me. I wasn't, necessarily, and this might be different for someone who's, their sibling is very young and kind of unaware of this sort of thing, but it certainly wasn't something that you could hide from me. And I know that when there were instances that my parents would try to keep things from me to like protect me, it inevitably made me feel as if, I guess as if I couldn't be trusted. It made me feel that maybe they thought I wasn't capable of helping and navigating these very difficult situations with them. And similarly to what Kim said, it made me feel excluded from the family when that happened. But at the same time, I want to reiterate this idea that there's a balance, right? Respecting the loved one's wishes, but also knowing that sometimes people have to be involved.
Yeah. And providing a little context too for how you would do a disclosure like this before we hear from Bella, because I want people to know nobody in here is saying just like, say, we don't care what you say and hang up the phone and go make your phone calls, right? We in the context of if we would encourage you to disclose, or if you decide to enclose, we would hope you're in a PHP program, you take it to family therapy, you say, we've made a family parental decision, maybe using some of what you learned here, that we no longer feel like we're able to accommodate this request, and these are the reasons why. And so, you know, we're here to talk about how are we going to do it, who, you know, who's going to do it, how is that all going to play out. So you can, we talk a lot about walking the middle path, and there's definitely a middle path between total secrecy and I don't care what you want, we're doing it anyway. And really would always encourage people to do it in that very validating way of everybody's pain and suffering in this. I will say already, though, I've been talking about this for years and am good friends with you, Kim, and I feel like I'm learning how getting insights here today already that are really impacting. I'm in my feels quite a bit, so.
Yes, so I echo a lot of what everyone here has said for sure, specifically with around the concept that eating disorders thrive in secrecy. I think that is a really important thing to remember, and then to utilize the familial bond and love that people have for each other to really help someone recover from an eating disorder. I mean, it takes a team, and something that I've kind of jogged my memory with everything everyone is saying is, so like I said, I was 12 at the time when my sister was diagnosed, and kind of probably like 12 through 14 was the worst of it. Something I neglected to say that I will say is my sister's fully recovered. She's 22 right now. She's my best friend. I just wanted to, forgot to mention that at the start. So that's wonderful. But something that I've been thinking about is, like I said, I was only 12 at the time. However, I remember when my sister was sick, there were times throughout the process that my parents would ask me even for my opinion on something or my input, or like they still valued, even just as a 12-year-old then, what I thought about things and what I had to say. And I think that was something that was really helpful for me personally in the moment, to really feel part of the team, helping to defeat this awful eating disorder, and something that obviously I think translates to older children as well. Like even better, you like Mary was saying, you know, you're older and you have a better understanding of really what everything entails and what is going on. But I think the fact that even at 12 years old, I was able to kind of help my parents translate from a preteen perspective, like, oh, do you think this is the eating disorder? Or do you think this is a normal preteen reaction to something? Do you think she wants to do this because the eating disorder wants her to, or because she really wants to go hang out with her friends, or XYZ? So I think there's a lot of input and that the sibling could provide that can really help heal everything that's going on. And I think there's the more perspectives that you feel comfortable in the family, the better. It really takes a team, and it's not a linear process by any means, and no one knows exactly what to do, or there's no laid out way to handle all of this. So I think that that's something that's sparked in my mind through all this conversation.
Yeah, and you know, I can tell how hard this is for this parent, and really want to provide the context. And one thing that I get sort of pedantic about, and haven't actually been doing myself here very well, is really continuing to say, instead of saying my daughter doesn't want, my daughter's eating disorder doesn't want, because we can all just about guarantee you that your daughter herself wants nothing more than the support and love of everyone in the family. The eating disorder is afraid of that, because the more you have this circle of love and care around you, the more likely the eating disorder is going to be eradicated. And that's very scary to the eating disorder. So it's a very specific strategy eating disorders use, is to keep us isolated from each other in conversation about it. And I'm thinking back as we hit this topic, about some families that I've worked with who had siblings over 18 and were sort of on the fence about it. And one of the things that I would say with the folks who were over 18, and I don't know the severity of where your daughter is, but I had a couple conversations with people about, if your child with the eating disorder doesn't make it, how is their sibling going to feel, sort of that they weren't given the chance to maybe change that? And I've really seen that dynamic happen over 18. And siblings, I'm just going to say it, siblings have a lot of clarity very often. Siblings and step parents, I'm going to say both, I really think are very often underutilized in all of this, right? They have to be part of this mess, whether they want to be part of it because they're there. But there's something about, you know, as a parent, most people here, you know, on here, we're going to be parents already. It's like, your child, like it's just a piece of your heart, right? And that just the eating disorder knows how to like wring it out and stomp on it and everything else, and really cloud your perspective. So very often seeking that perspective of someone who loves them, but not in a parental way, which is a very specific type of love, very vulnerable to, you know, some very specific dynamics in that, that slight, and I don't even want to call it distance in the case of a sibling or even a step parent, but it's love just with clear vision, right? The glasses aren't foggy. And so we all know, right? Everyone's been to that party where you look at someone else's family and you go home and you talk on the way home in the car or whatever about what you saw and how you could identify that stuff. You could never do that to your own family. So you get that little bit of help that's really helpful. And so I would just say to this mom as well, like you said, you've been given the role of secret keeper, and that sounds like a very painful role for you. It sounds like doing that, maybe feeding the eating disorder and being in service of the eating disorder. And I do want to empower you that, you know, everyone has agency in this, and it being respectful and working with the therapy team. I do think you can successfully sort of draw your boundary that you refuse to keep a secret from one of your children about another of your children. To me seems like a fair boundary, and have that conversation and work through it in therapy. And the ultimate goal we would have, you know, if you were working with our team or that sort of thing, would be to give a little space for that person then to come to self-disclosure and to be the person that then reveals it. And that's ultimately how much how we'd want to do that. Lots of empathy and sympathy for you in this.
JD, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
And also, it's reminding me as I'm sitting here we're three women, very, I think, similar roles in the family, older sisters. And I think that has siblings. I often say this to parents: siblings aren't one type. We're not a group of people that react the exact same way. The onset comes at different ages for people. Behaviors are different. Eating disorder types are different. There may be co-occurring issues happening. All families look different. I think there's roles if you're super young when the onset happens. Like I'm thinking, Bella, your brother who's younger probably has a very different storyline than you do, coming up at that age. And you trust yourself with your child as well. So, you know your son, and you know how he'll respond to this. And if they've had a really horrible relationship up to this point, oh, that's going to be a different conversation than if they've been really good friends. So bringing that to the treatment team and being able to say, oh, this is my son's personality. This is my daughter's personality. The eating disorder doesn't want this to happen. This is how I don't want to be secret keeper. You know, can we make this a topic? What a perfect topic to discuss and really address. And then bringing in their personalities too. I think it's really important. We're not widgets, you know, we're not just like, well, if you put A, B, and C in, siblings will thrive, or here's the answer to this. I wish there was a magic pill, right? But it doesn't go like that. It takes time. And ladies, jump in too, please, if I am not speaking for you, but I bet that if you asked 100 siblings would come back and say, none of what we're saying is to put blame or shame on parents or anybody in the family. We deeply, deeply love our siblings. And the anger, the guilt, the stress, any emotion that comes out is all coming out from lack of support, education, feeling isolated, needing time with parents, being afraid your sister or brother's going to die, not understanding, not knowing what your role is, all this confusion, right? So in anything that and again, tell me if I'm out of line, but anything we're going to say is all coming from a place of love. It's all coming from a place of, we want this all to work out, and this is how it felt for us. So just keep that in mind, because I know this is a really tender area for parents because you already have a child that's sick, you're in crisis and in struggle. And now we're saying, oh, guess what? Your other kids are struggling. That is really hard to hear. I want to acknowledge that up front. And you, even if you mess up, you could go back and say, guess what? I messed up.
Yeah.
I should have told you earlier. But
That's
I was, even if your son's mad at you right now, let's play this out. He finds out a month or two from now and he's furious. Why didn't I know about my sister? This is ridiculous. You know what? I messed up. I'm trying to help her. I want to do what's best for you. I'm in struggle. Can we talk this out? It's not too late. So believe in that, please. Because I see a lot of tears from parents often, and just don't take all this burden of I'm bad and their shame and all. Just let it go. You don't have the space for it. You're doing your best and you've shown up here. So that says a whole lot, right? I think that's really important.
Such an important point. There's no rule book for how this goes. Nobody got handed that manual. I really like what Kevin Dunn says, our mentorship director, that nobody's family's original operating software has this element to it, fighting the eating disorder piece. So you need to put a patch in, and then you need to upgrade to version 2.0, the one that has the how do we fight an eating disorder in our family. And I think that's a brilliant way to put it. There's another question in here that I think is very important. Have a 32-year-old brother who has had severe anorexia for at least 5 years and vehemently denies that everyone in the family acknowledges except him. Do you have an advice for getting an adult in the throes of eating disorder to agree to active treatment? And again, would be sort of helpful in this situation. I think a lot of it depends on logistically how the family is set up. If this is a person who's a fully financially independent, self-supporting adult and everyone is looking at afar, or is this a person so impacted by the eating disorder that they can't work and are living at home with another family member? All of those are going to go into that. Some of the things as well, one of the things is we're talking about openness. Well, first of all, let's talk about anosognosia for a moment, because I think that's really important. So that vehemently denies it piece, just want to provide some context that it might not in fact be denial. It might be something called anosognosia, or lack of insight. And what that means is that his own brain literally doesn't recognize that's what's happening. And I'm really passionate about this because this is something that happened to my daughter. Did not object going to doctors to find out why she couldn't eat anymore, why she was losing weight. That she was curious as well as the rest of us were, right? And so a lot of people will understand the parallel in schizophrenia, where a lot of people with schizophrenia do not realize they're sick or choose to go off their meds because they think it's not a problem anymore, that sort of thing. So it is a bit of a different thing than denial, although also there can be people who recognize their eating disorder and don't want to get treatment for it. Off the top of my head, I will say that there is an approach if this is everyone's completely, sort of independent and you're just looking on from afar and want to see how you can help. There's an approach that I've recently learned about called listen, empathize, accept, and partner, or LEAP. And it's directly tied to anosognosia, and there's a lot of it is related to schizophrenia, because the person who developed it, that's the roots of it. But it's a different approach than trying to convince someone when you just keep butting heads and they can't accept it. So that's one thing. I'll drop a link in, and that's not specifically eating disorder related, but I do think it's a pretty helpful tool. What thoughts do you all have on that? On how someone, for who's 32, who's been sick from 27 to 32, how the rest of the family might approach this?
I'll jump in. We did this, and I don't know, this is probably going to be dramatic for some of you. So my sister, again, she lived till she was 30. So we had many years of this, and it was very painful. So I empathize with you. For a long time, we did nothing. and just loved them. She was in and out of hospitals. She didn't deny it, but she was like, listen, I'm fine. I'll be fine. There was that piece of, I need this. This is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to be. My sister's behaviors were very excessive too. So really intense behaviors, and it was challenging for me. And there came a point where it was too difficult for me to just go to dinners or holidays with her. And I felt like I can't watch this anymore. I have begged, cried, stole, yelled, screamed, done everything I know how to do. If there was an option, I did it. And so I went to a therapist and said, what do I do with that? My heart is broken already, 6,000 pieces, and I don't know what to do. And she said, what do you want? And I said, I can't be around this anymore. Now, when I said that, understand, that took me to my knees. I felt horrible as a human being. She said, well, what if we decide to do an intervention with your family? And what we ended up doing was an intervention to say, listen, we love you and we want you in our lives. And we can't do more. We want you to get better, but you're saying no. So we'll see you, but we can't do that around food. Well, that meant we weren't going to see her. I mean, that was a big thing. But if you go into treatment, we are going to be there every step of the way. We're there for you 100%. It's your choice. And they set it up and we did this whole thing, and our family, like, wow, did she try to pull us apart on that? And it really was, but it worked. She went in. I can't say that will happen for every family, but it was
Well, we did. I think that's a wonderful thing, because for a wonderful anecdote for you to share in terms of this, because the person has shared that does live with parents and protests the eating disorder, is sort of more accurate than denial. And one thing I'm really passionate about, my family of origin had a lot of mental health challenges, and so I grew up with a lot of untreated mental illness. And so I speak to this from that lived experience perspective as well. I am a huge fan of recognizing that everyone over the age of 18 has autonomy. And that applies not only to the person with the eating disorder, that applies to each and every person in their sphere and each and every family member. So I have seen a lot of success with people just putting up boundaries. And we will often talk here about, I will love you to life, I refuse to enable you to death, as sort of an overarching umbrella for our approach in in people over the age of 18 with this sort of thing. And so it's people will say, I can't tell them what to do, and that's true. What you can do is serve notice, as you did in your family, Kim, of how I am willing to live, how we are willing to live, and the boundaries that we are going to have. And it's not an unreasonable boundary to say that I don't want in my home, we will not live with an untreated eating disorder. And this is a strategy that we did deploy with our daughter over the age of 18 that also was very successful as well, Kim. And it really was true. I couldn't live with myself if I allowed this in my home and was a party to it. And even though it was, talk about, again, that wringing of mama's heart out, certainly true. And conversations were had with just tears continually streaming down the face. And also I felt very, very secure in my conviction that I knew where it would lead to continue. So for me, I would rather roll the dice and help her get fully well than be a part of enabling this continuing to live this way. Mary and Bella, what are your thoughts on this really hard topic?
So I don't know how much conversation has happened between you and your brother about, the potential eating disorder that's going on. One of the things that has been really effective with, the families that I've worked with, and even just in my own life with people that share their experiences with me and within my family, has been coming from a place of curiosity And I wonder if there's a way to maybe frame a conversation with your brother that's a little bit coming more from just genuine curiosity of what your experience is like. How do you live your day to day? You know, what are some challenges that you have, or what are some things that I can do to help you? And sometimes that opens up a little bit more of a free flowing conversation that feels less like an accusation, like you have anorexia and you need treatment.
Mhm.
And again, I don't know how much conversation has taken place, but I think it's a good place to start. And another thing too that has been effective in, you know, in my own life with helping some of my friends and acquaintances, I don't know why, but throughout my life, people have opened up to me about just mental health problems. And, you know, I had a friend who, you know, it was very clear to me that she was struggling with some ED behavior. And I had a conversation with her one time, and the way that I framed it was, hey, you want to hear about some like really weird stuff that I used to do when I had OCD? I've never shared it with anyone, but I want to talk to you about it. And I just like started telling her about my OCD experience or whatever. And that prompted her to be like, oh, yeah, that kind of sounds like some of the stuff that I do, but like it's because like, you know, I feel bad about my body and blah, blah, blah. And then she started opening up about all of like this hidden eating disorder behavior that was going on. And it was just something that she knew that people were observing her, and she knew that people knew that there was something going on at meal times, right? There were clear behaviors like you know, deconstructing food or taking all the chocolate chips out of a cookie. And it was stuff that sometimes people would tease her about, but she would always just be like, oh no, I'm just picky or whatever. And I just like sat down with her one day and I was like, you want to hear about this weird stuff I used to do? And it kind of made her feel like like a human, and like, hey, you know, we have our own issues going on, and you know, mine so happens to be OCD or an eating disorder or anxiety or a million other things that can be going on. But yeah, those are just two things that come to mind.
And even as you say that, that also feels like a super appropriate way for a sibling to approach it, because it is different for the sibling than the parents. And that actually feeds into another question that we have. And I can't believe it's 5:19. This was like so awesome, and it's going so fast. So I want to make sure I get to these questions. And this one says, my 15-year-old son has anorexia. He has an older sister and brother and a 13-year-old brother. It's my understanding that you don't ask siblings to help supervise meals. Is that the case? And if it is, what are other ways to utilize the siblings to help? So I'm going to give a broad answer, and then, you know, want to hear everyone's perspectives on this. And in general, I would say that is a thing that most clinical teams are going to say, and most providers are going to say, that it's just a lot of responsibility, and it introduces into the sibling dynamic a role of, in some ways, tattling on your sibling. And I have 4 kids, and you know, there's no more unifying thing for 4 siblings than to be like pushing at parents or that kind of thing. Like, that's the job, like, in some ways, right? Siblings are supposed to be their own unit that doesn't tell mom and dad about stuff and things like that. And so what I worry about in terms of siblings supervising, and I think, you know, as Mary's alluded, like there could be some age things and cultural dynamic considerations in this as well. And for me, like, I wouldn't want you know, sort of a 15 or, you know, sort of a teenager, you know, having to make this decision. Do I tell parents that my sibling didn't eat at all? They've just begged me not to, or I saw them hide something, but then they're going to be so upset if I out it. So that's sort of one of the thoughts about that. And then I'm also really excited to hear all of you talk about this question: is what are other ways to utilize the siblings to help? And I'm going to throw out, even before, to make sure this gets in, distraction. You know, they're the ones play the board game with, you know, the meal's over and they immediately shift to another space or get game station or whatever it is, or before meals they're, you know, out playing in the yard with the dog, so that they're not so sibling isn't focused on what's being cooked in the kitchen, what's happening with all of that. But the three of you experts, take it away on that one. I think it's such a good question.
Yeah, I can jump in here. 'Cause this is definitely something I feel like I had a lot of experience with. And this is honestly something I also feel like my parents did incredibly well throughout our whole experience. Was obviously, as like a sibling who loves my sister, I wanted to help in any capacity I can, and sometimes that capacity was, hey, I saw her throw away snack or hide something in the closet that she was supposed to eat, or XYZ, you name it. And that was obviously hard, like exactly what JD was saying. As a sibling, I don't want to become the bad guy. I don't want my sister to get mad at me. I want to still maintain that relationship we have, especially when it's needed most, to help get her through this really hard thing she's dealing with. And that's something that I think my parents did really well, was finding ways to work around that, so I wasn't at fault. They would find little ways to just make up little stories or something that obviously my sister would never realize that I was the one ratting on her and letting them know what was going on. So they were great at taking the blame and the heat for that comes in the parental role through all of this. And yeah, I really appreciated them for that. And I think it enabled me to continue my bond with my sister and give her that love and that distraction that JD was talking about. And it's actually something that we've been able to carry on as a family, even with my sister fully recovered. Or even growing up before she was diagnosed. My parents have always been really awesome about letting us know that we can make them the bad guys in tough situations. And we have this secret little cold cook that would just text them Fruit Loops if we were ever in a situation with friends and something bad was happening. We felt peer pressured and didn't want to be there. They would know if they get that Fruit Loops text, it's SOS, pick me up. Mom and dad are making me go home. Stupid parents, like always having that out. So they were really great at that, and I think that's a way that worked for our family that I think was really helpful. And I'll let someone chime in.
I was thinking I'm just trying to think of some other ways that are popping in my head that I've seen families do. I worked with one family that was they did this amazing use of what I'm going to call nostalgia. And it was a sibling that came up with this idea that when things were really tough, when it was a really emotionally dysregulated sort of situation, they took out photo albums. And they just sat on, sibling with an eating disorder might be on the bed, just crying, or on the couch just crying and distraught and everything else. And so instead of trying to sort of logic out of it or talk them into it or whatever, they would just sit in this loving circle and just look at old pictures and remember when we did that, and one day we're going to do that, and sort of not even attacking it directly, but providing this atmosphere of just reminding their loved one of what else they are about, what else is in their life. And I think that siblings are in a unique position to retain a connection to the authentic self, as you were talking about, Bella, and to sort of pick that up. And I wonder if, Mary, if that wasn't sort of part of how things were successful with your sisters, that you were sort of still always able to see her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I would always, reiterate, and it was sort of my mantra, was, this is still Carrie. This is still my sister. She's a human being, and she's talented and amazing and beautiful and generous and has all these amazing qualities. And she just so happens to have an eating disorder. And when families are really in the thick of it, I think, for example, my dad had a very hard time externalizing the eating disorder, and really experienced a lot of just anger that he didn't know how to channel appropriately. And sometimes it would come out in the form of just really mean negative comments to my sister. And I really felt like as a sibling, it was important to be there to remind my parents that we all had to align against the eating disorder, not make my sister feel like anyone was aligned against her. Because I guess from my slightly more detached view of my sister as a sibling, I always had her qualities and her humanity present at the forefront, and that was something that I was constantly trying to preserve and to emphasize, was this idea that she's not gone, she's still there. She is the person that we are interacting with today, but sometimes we interact with her eating disorder. And so I think siblings can be really effective at reminding parents and helping guide that externalizing and realigning parents against the eating disorder.
Yeah. And as in the 3 minutes that we have left, you said something that I want to give people a preview. Next week, we're doing in alignment with Father's Day. We're going to have some dads on who've done this. And when you talked about what your dad experienced, I just want to say that that is just such a common thing, because in our culture, most men are really taught to only access any negative emotion as anger, so that they just like, and it's not necessarily even their fault. That's what they've been taught, right? They've never been taught. So huge fan of a feeling wheel for anyone in the family who has the reaction of all negative emotions expressed as fear or as anger. And one of the things that can happen as you go through this, right, is you can have improved communication and stronger family, like all of that sort of stuff on the other side of it. So really want people to understand you can lean into that. And we have in the comment thread one very, very proud mother named Mama Bear, who would like to ask what mistakes that she and your dad made and what she wishes you would have done differently. And she says, no judgment, only love, and I know your mom, so she's thinking other people may be able to learn from this. So I take that question at its very face value.
That is my mother. And I inherit her easily tearing eyes, so she's gonna make me tear up. I think they did so many things well, and we were all learning together. But I think something that could have been helpful was maybe just really focusing on, I think we developed a way of checking in with me and my brother, that we would have kind of just regular family meetings in the living room, just kind of seeing how everybody was feeling and what was going on, what was good, what was bad, all of everything in between. But I think maybe just like having very tangible experiences with the siblings that are going through this is really helpful. Just going out shopping, going to the movies, going to get ice cream, more one-on-one with the siblings is really helpful. And I think something that I could have probably used a little more of, and I understand that my parents were working their butts off and it was hard physically and emotionally. It took a toll on them. So I understand. Also now being in medical school, sometimes my free time, I just want to sit and vegetate and do nothing. So I understand the need to not always want to have a busy schedule when your life is a busy schedule, as it is dealing with this and fighting a really hard eating disorder. But I think, yeah, just really making sure that siblings know they are valued and they are loved just as much as the other sibling, and they matter just as much, which my parents tell me still every day to this day. But yeah, when I was in 3rd grade, so this was before my sister was ever diagnosed, I went on a ski trip alone with my mom and dad, and that's still to this day like something I cherish and think about and remember vividly. So just having those experiences is super helpful.
That's such a wonderful way to end this really compelling, and we are definitely going to have to do it again. I mean, it's just so much great stuff from all of you, and just want to highlight that's actually something, because I think family mentors will often very much talk about this topic with parents and it's a lot of times, to your point about how overwhelmed parents are, we don't want everyone to think that it has to be something big. Sometimes it can be, and some families are able to hire help for a weekend or have grandparents come or various other configurations of doing something a little bit bigger. And it's also okay to sort of just have 5 minutes in every day. Maybe it's bedtime, and maybe, if you have a household with more than one parent, maybe you take turns, but just sitting on the bed and saying, we see you, we hear you, please tell us, how can we make sure that that you're seen and heard through this. And really, I think, working out with families, asking the sibling what they want, or do you want to, there are siblings, as Mary pointed out, her like, no, I want to do this stuff, like, let me do this stuff, right? And that's what's right for them. And there are others who are like, I don't want any part of that, that feels so much pressure, that's too much, and that's what's right for them. So your family, your kids, and as Mary said, start with curiosity. Ask everyone, what do you need from us now? And if it's what they need is maybe too much at that moment, we can't do that now, but maybe we could do this, and then we could put a pin in that, and we could return to it. So, research really does show that simple acknowledgement is in and of itself mental health care for people going through something. To what Kim said of the times of feeling gaslit, right? We can prevent that. We can prevent that by checking in, by acknowledging the situation. And even if we have no magic wand to wave it and make it better, that in and of itself will show the siblings that they are loved for, that they are cared. And thank you so much to the three of you for being here today. Again, apologies for the tech snafus in the beginning, and really just so happy to visit this topic. And thank you for all the work you do in this space. And people will get resources that have links to some of these things we've talked about. So look for this email. And we hope everyone has a good week. And we see you here next week for Dads on Deck. All right. Talk to everyone later. Bye-bye.